Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Doug Major, and I'm the Superintendent of Meridian Technology Center in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm also the President-elect of the Association for Career and Technical Education. This is the first webinar of a series that we're focusing on planning for a COVID-19 impacted school year and looking at it through specifically the lens of ACTE's high-quality programs of study framework. Today's topic is systems support. System support is a new element of the framework that encompasses the supports that need to be in place at a broader systems level in order to ensure that career and technical education programs of study can flourish, including policies, funding, research, cross-system collaboration, education and labor market alignment, and CTE marketing and recruitment efforts across programs. These supports are usually not specific to individual programs, but provide the foundation on which all high-quality programs in a local area operate. In the context of COVID-19, we know there are many decisions about scheduling, safety, staffing, funding, and overall program offerings that will be made by institutions, districts, or even states that affect career and technical education programs broadly. And those are the issues that we want to dive into today. As we begin, let me express thanks for the work that each and every one of you on this particular webinar are doing to keep our schools open, safe, and as effective as possible during an extremely challenging time. We realize it's a stressful period, and we hope that this webinar series will be useful and a support to you. I would like to thank our panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us today. I will introduce them in a minute, but I first want to share a few directions about how we will be conducting the meeting and how you can interact with us today. First, you may notice that we're using Zoom Webinar, which is different from the Zoom meetings ACTE has used in the past. Zoom Webinar allows for more participants and has some different features I would like to explain. We will be using the Q&A feature for questions. The mics, participant videos, and chat features have all been disabled due to our large crowd. Please type your questions into the Q&A box. I think you'll find this feature easy to use and more efficient than the chat feature. We encourage you to share your questions throughout the presentation as our panelists and ACTE staff will be responding during the event. We also encourage you as attendees to share answers to questions as well in cases where you've already discovered solutions or best practices. You can also share any resources that you have in the Q&A box as well. Just type the links and share the information as you would in a chat feature. It doesn't have to be in the form of a question. And if you experience technical challenges, please use the raise hand feature in the participant box. Someone on ACTE staff will respond to help you. Again, thank you for joining us. And next, I would like to introduce Alicia Heislip, ACTE Senior Director of Public Policy, to provide a few opening remarks about ACTE's high-quality CTE program of study, which this webinar and the entire series is built upon. Alicia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon to begin to talk about what a COVID impact school year might look like, whether that's returning for you in the summer or the fall or even later in the school year. We know there are a multitude of issues that you will be facing, and we hope this webinar series will help you as you work through those decisions and challenges. The webinar series, as Doug mentioned, is based on ACTE's high-quality CTE program of study framework. So these are the 12 elements of ACTE's high-quality program of study, and we'll be working through each of these elements in the webinar series. But one of the things after these original 12 elements were introduced that we came to realize was that while these elements are critical to the success of individual programs, and that's really how we designed the framework itself, there's a whole system of supports that need to be in place around those elements. And that's where this 13th element, as we're calling it, of system supports came in. And it encompasses all of those things that Doug mentioned related to funding and policy and administrative support and staffing issues and labor market alignment and systems alignment that are necessary for CTE programs to function on their own and in concert with the rest of the programs in their area. So with that, we have begun just in the last few months using this systems supports element, and you'll start to see more materials coming out from ACTE around this element as we move forward in the future. But we thought, in light of all of the challenges being faced by schools, that it would be an important place to start for the conversation around programs for next school year. So we just wanted to provide that background. I'm going to put a link in the Q&A to resources around all of the high quality elements, just so you know where to find those in the future. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Doug. Thanks for the technical assist there.
Sure, I just happen to have that up. And Alicia, you might notice that this is a poster that we've created and we'll be displaying in all of our program areas throughout our school. We've adopted the high quality programs of study as our professional development sequence. And so we'll be having lots of discussions about these. So at this time, I would like to introduce our panelists that we have with us today. We have 3 panelists. All are very active in career and technical education in different parts of the country. So joining us, we have Jennifer Boyd, who is Career and Technical Education Curriculum Specialist for the Davenport Community Schools in Davenport, Iowa. We have Arlie Huffman, who is Director of Career and Technical Education and the Principal of Boulder Tech with the Boulder Valley School District in Boulder, Colorado. And we have Maria Torres, who is Assistant Principal of the Technical Affairs at Diamond Regional Vocational Technical High School in Fall River, Massachusetts. So thank you all for joining us, and we appreciate hearing from you and learning from your expertise. And so I do have a series of questions that I'm going to propose and would ask that each of you respond to those. Would like to, on your first question though, you might give us kind of the context of the district that you work in. For example, I work in a shared time center, and so as we make decisions regarding school for next year, we have to take into account the decisions of 10 different public schools districts within north central Oklahoma. And so that complicates our decisions just a little bit. So if you could give us a little bit of context as you answer the first question, then we'll go from there. But the first question that I have for you panelists is, as you are completing this 2019-20 school year and are beginning to look ahead to the summer and fall, what's the current situation on your campus? Have you reopened to serve any students in person? Have decisions been made about whether you'll be offering in person or blended or distance learning for next school year? Kind of what's your current status? And so, Jennifer, if we could start with you, would love to hear your response.
Sure. So in Davenport, we have 3 comprehensive high schools and 1 alternative, and we do have CTE programs at all of our comprehensive high schools, as well as our alternative. Right now, we were voluntary after March 13th, which means that we didn't have any required learning. It was kind of a student choice, and we just ended the school year last Friday. So we are in Iowa, we are developing return to learn plans. The governor has requested that we come up with 3 potential options: a face-to-face option and what we will do to stay safe, a hybrid potential option, or a full online. So we have teams all over the district working together to address all of those different areas. So at this point in time, we don't know what will be happening come the fall, and we are planning for every possible scenario.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you. And I think my 3 favorite words at this point since spring break has been, I don't know, because I seem to use those quite a bit. So Maria, how about you?
Thanks, Doug. We're a regional school, so we have 4 sending districts at our school in Fall River, and we too are in the process of trying to guess what is going to be happening and what September will look like. Right now, our governor and commissioner on education has set forth some guidelines as they relate to what we will need for PPE so that schools can get a jump start on ordering those materials and those supplies. But we really do not have a good picture of what school is going to look like. 85% of what we will be doing will be dictated by our commissioner, and 15% will be left to us to decide.
Okay.
We,
oh, go ahead.
We are not in session, so we have no one at the school, and we're over on the 19th. We're done on the 19th.
Okay, so everything's being done distance at this point?
Correct.
Okay. Harley, how are things with you?
Well, very, very similar story, of course. So Boulder Valley School District is centered around Boulder, Colorado. So it's mostly a suburban setting. We have a total of about 9 high schools. We also reach up into the mountains, which we'll get to, provides some unique challenges to access. Our school year ended just before Memorial Day. Nothing had changed really by then. We were still mandated by the state to be at home. And we are preparing 5 different phases for reentry, ranging from, again, entirely online to what everybody would love is, all the kids walk back in the school altogether in August. Of course, we know that's quite unlikely. And it just depends. Our timeline is set to really take into account any information that comes in between now and the end of July. Our students would restart in about the second week of August, third week of August. So there'll be a lot of action that happens toward the middle and end of the summer, depending on what guidance we get from our state health department and our state government.
Okay, sounds like everybody's kind of in that same mode of we'll kind of have to wait and see what transpires toward that end. I know that for years and years we've fought to have CTE classes kind of on an even playing field with our academic classes in schools. And so my next question is kind of around that in terms of how involved have the CTE leaders of your district been in the decisions regarding reopening schools and what the school year might look like in terms of a virtual environment? Have the CTE programs been considered as a main part of the discussion, or are they kind of over here, oh, those are okay if we can't have those? What's the feel in your area? Maria? Maria, you're still muted.
As you said, we've always worked to have vocational education, technical education be on an even playing field with academics. For us in Massachusetts, we have a very good working relationship with local government and with our Department of Education. So once a week, the Associate Commissioner has a briefing, and she takes our feedback back to the Commissioner, and they consider our feedback. I don't think that we'll ever be able to achieve that same level because we're such a minority within the state of schools. So when they're making decisions, they tend to make them more for that academic group. But we do have a voice at the state level. In Massachusetts, the directors, the technical directors do communicate their needs. And, we're a big state, so there's a lot of diversity from, the East Coast to the west part of our state. So, so we do have a voice, which is great.
It is great. And I know you also have a number of technical high schools, more so than we would here in Oklahoma. So
we do, and we also have comprehensive high schools that have technical components as part of their high school as well. Rhode Island is right across this, the border from us, very, very close. They only have one, but they have like technical institutes. We don't have those here. We have the high school itself is a technical program with academics embedded in it, but we have comprehensive high schools.
Okay, I'm not sure if, Maria, you froze a little bit on my end, but I think that you did a good job of kind of saying that we're not quite on an even playing field, but we're getting closer. So Arlie, what about Colorado?
Yeah, it's highly dependent really on the districts. I mean, we are a local control state. So the state system that oversees career tech ed is the community college system, actually. And so that involves both secondary and post-secondary. And so they are a pretty strong voice, and they are at the table when we're talking about access and what things might look like. Of course, one of the challenges that's come up is that when you're looking at the distinction between post-secondary and secondary, there are a lot of different considerations, for students that are under 18. So in that case, as Maria mentioned, we are not seen as equal need. And quite often the core academics are getting the majority of the attention, which is a little concerning. Obviously, we're just making quite a bit of headway in the state about linking career and tech ed opportunities and pathways to industry needs, industry certificates. And in an environment where we can't support that pretty specifically in a classroom or with specific students, we're going to lose that opportunity. The students will lose that opportunity to get to that level. So that is absolutely one of the things that's a biggest concern to us. We don't know where that's going to look like, what that's going to look like right now. The other piece around that is that when you think about access to some of what we need at an industry standard level, that is very, very difficult for students to be able to do at home. So trying to set up some sort of environment where, if nothing else, we could have a small number of students in a shop at once working together, trying to get those hands-on skills at least to some level. And that kind of approach is at least under consideration within our district and across the state.
Okay. All right, Arlie, thank you. Jim?
So I meet with other CTE people in my position from across the state. I actually just met with them on Friday. So I'll speak from Davenport, Iowa perspective, but also what's happening in some of our other bigger districts around Iowa. Our governor is a huge supporter of CTE. So CTE has really been a focus in the state of recent years. So it's definitely, we have support from that end. Our Department of Ed, we have a CTE division that is hugely supportive and is working with, the rest of our Department of Ed as they develop some of these guidelines. So that's wonderful from the state side. We also in Davenport specifically, CTE has become incredibly important within our district and has received a lot of support from our superintendent and our district leaders. We have added CTE teachers as well as myself and some of our other leaders that are very that understand the needs of CTE onto our return to learn planning teams. So we have a voice in most of the groups. And we're actually requesting that, CTE classes, you have to have the hands-on. Language arts, not so much. So language arts, you can do that virtually and go ahead and bring our CTE kids on campus. So we're having those kinds of conversations. We have received, hold harmless, piece of documentation that parents could sign to say that they would approve their student to go to, an on-site location, following proper PPE. We received that from our School Administrators of Iowa group. Their lawyer actually developed that. So we do a student-built home. We're still planning. We're digging the ground right now. We're still planning to have that program happen, even if we're not, in a face-to-face setting. So we are engaged and we're being heard by our leaders and those people that are really developing this plan to ensure that our students are getting access, and we're really identifying which classes need to have some sort of a hands-on component for the students to hit that industry level. Like Arlie, you said, there are certain requirements. You've got to have the kids in the space to do it. It's just not realistic to watch a video and then go weld something. So, we're being loud and we're really advocating for what is best for our students and our programs.
Yeah. Well, I think you all pointed to the fact that Career Tech does require students to have some face-to-face interaction, and we were able to open back up for certain students on the 15th of May, and we prioritized allowing those to come back in that needed very specific requirements in order to finish and reach certification. So for the last 2 weeks of May, we were all pincushions and had tracks in our arms where our phlebotomy students were trying to get their required number of sticks, both in our arms and our fingers. We had some really great staff members who sacrificed to allow those students to finish. And I guess that kind of brings us to our next question is, as you're planning for later summer classes or fall classes, what are those safety precautions that you're considering putting or implementing if you're able to bring students back onto campus? And so, Jen, I might just start with you. You kind of headed in that direction with your last answer.
Yeah, so definitely the hold harmless documentation will be valuable, making sure that our parents are comfortable. We also have students that are registered, high school registered apprentices, and they will officially be going back on July 6th to the workforce. And, you know, that's been a major piece, making sure that our parents, our students, and our partners are comfortable with it. In addition, we're looking at smaller class sizes, you know, to ensure that we can keep that 6-foot distance, you know, different rounds of students coming on either different days of the week or different time frames. We're in the brainstorm sessions right now. We don't have anything absolutely determined at this point, but a big consideration is that material management, you know, and how are we going to make sure that the students that are using the same equipment are you know, that it's sanitized in between uses, that we're really adhering to what those guidelines are from the CDC. So we're investigating all of that right now, but definitely the smaller class sizes, you know, and the stricter protocol for safety and management PPE.
Okay, Jen, thanks. And Arlie, before you answer that, just want to make an announcement. I was just made aware that up until just a couple of seconds ago, the Q&A feature was not working, but they think they have that technically fixed now. So if you're a participant, you have questions, please feel free to try to post those in the Q&A section. So Arlie, what are you all thinking about in Boulder?
Sure. Well, a couple major challenges that come, if you might imagine, with a CTE center, and we do have that, and I'm the principal of that for our district, where we're transporting students from all the other high schools into our building, and again, as is quite common, it's half a day every day. So we have our morning students and our afternoon students, and then they disperse. Well. That transportation challenge is probably one of the highest hurdles that we're trying to figure out how to get across. Our guidance is that we're looking at perhaps only 6 or 8 students per school bus to maintain distancing. And when you think about what that would require to maintain the same level of transportation into our center, that's just not attainable. We can't do that. So we're having to think a little differently about that. And just as Jen mentioned, we're in the brainstorming side of that right now. What that might look like. Could we bring students in, for example, for an intense all-day shorter session? Maybe that's a 6-week session or something like that, where they would get a semester's worth of work. They would come to us all day, every day, and then we wouldn't see them again, which again isn't ideal, but it might allow them the opportunity to get through the skills, get through as much of the curriculum as possible in that intensive amount of time. So again, it's literally the brainstorming where we're just throwing everything out there and seeing what might resonate and might fit with all the other high schools in our district.
Okay, Arlie, thank you. Maria?
At our schools, our biggest hurdle right now is that when we left school in a mass exodus, and we had so many first responders that were short PPE, a lot of the Massachusetts schools at the vocational schools donated all of their PPE. So we have nothing left. So our biggest challenge is going to be getting everything in a timely fashion into the building, because of course everything is back ordered and everything now costs $1 million to purchase. Our budgets are also going to be cut significantly. The state has had a tremendous shortfall in revenue because of all these businesses and not billing for taxes and delayed tax returns, that we're looking at a potential of 20% cuts financially. So now we have that to contend with. We did about 8 weeks now, it's been 8 weeks ago, purchased foggers for our maintenance crew, for them to disinfect the building once we do return back. But again, that was 8 weeks ago. We still haven't received those. We are, part of the protocol that came out was that the state developed a list of how many masks and shields and gloves you needed to have per person, and it is an astronomical amount. The volume is just overbearing. To be honest with you, I'm not quite sure how we're going to pull it off and get that volume of material into the building when everybody else in the state is fighting for the same amount. But it's 6 feet apart, no more than 10 to a class with 2 teachers. Hand washing sanitizers in the room. You need to have a gallon of hand sanitizer in every classroom. So it's going to be a little bit challenging, but those are some of the things that we're looking at. We already get our students in some of our shops respirator fit, in the auto collision and building property maintenance, but now we have to get our nurses fit for N95s. So it's going to be challenging.
It's a lot. It's a lot to think about. It can be overwhelming pretty easily when you stop and think about it. And so I know when we switched after spring break, we basically went on spring break and then this all occurred. So our students didn't come back. And so as we moved to distance education, part of the finishing of students required them to have certain technologies available. And some of our students don't have access to technology at home because they live in a remote area. They don't have internet access. Some of the software that we use in our CAD programs, our digital media programs, can't be run on any home computer or laptop. And so I know we were sending out into private homes some pretty expensive equipment in order to help ensure that all of our students had the opportunity to continue their learning. And that's kind of where our next question goes. As we look to the future, and if we have to go to some sense of blended learning or distance learning, and we talk about equity issues and making sure that all students have the same opportunity to learn, what are some of the considerations that you're making in your school district? So Jen, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. We are one-to-one with Chromebooks. So the majority of what students are able to access at home has to be web-based platforms. We did a survey with all of our families right when we started to identify if there were gaps in tech access, because having a Chromebook doesn't necessarily mean you're connected to the internet. So we got additional hotspots. We put them around the city, in some of our more high need areas to ensure that everybody could have their Chromebook and they could actually access the internet to, get the online materials. But like you've already mentioned, even with our computers, our accounting course, or our computer skills course, they need Microsoft Word. Well, we couldn't do that on the Chromebook. Even the cloud doesn't have the, the huge capability that the desktop version does. So we did the same thing as you, Doug. We passed out some, some pretty nice computers. And I was just thinking I should text my teacher, make sure she got them all back. But, finding some innovative solutions like that. We were working with the community college to possibly have some sort of a something that they could put onto the Chromebooks that would give them like a desktop access. So we're still exploring some of those options, but our teachers have been really great in modifying some of those, what the workload, really identifying what is the standard, what's the learning target, what's the competency they need, and how can we achieve that using the current existing equipment that they have. So that's kind of where a lot of our summer work is going to be as well. How can we adapt some of these main pieces of our curriculum to make sure that all students can access it and really get the, the targets as best they can.
Okay, Jen, thank you. Harlan, how about the equity issues for you?
Yeah, very, very similar story, obviously. And we were actually piloting in this past school year a desktop as a service platform for the Chromebooks. So we had a little bit of a head start on that, but it is to date cost prohibitive, and so that has been a challenge. We're still looking into that, because there is it does open up, as you know, a lot more access to some of the CAD programs. I can mention Microsoft Office Suite, things like that. So that is an avenue that we're still looking at very, very closely. And as Jen also mentioned, actually putting antennas on some of our buildings to provide internet access to those students and those families who didn't have it. And we were quite a ways down the road on that when this all hit in March. So we were able to complete that right away. That works well down here. I'd say down here, in the Boulder area and the cities nearby, where we don't have a large mountain ridge between a building and a home. Up in our mountain areas, best we could do is make sure that we had good access available at the schools so that students could travel to the school and sit in the parking lot in their car and be able to access the Wi-Fi through the school district. And which has worked. I mean, if you count that, we were able to provide access to 100% of our students. So we feel very good about that. I absolutely am a huge voice in the need for something like desktop as a service. Chromebooks are fantastic to get kids on the internet. There's a lot more there that we need to be getting them exposure to, and just major hurdle.
Okay, Arlie, thank you. Maria, what can you add?
Like Arlie and Jen, we are in the same boat when it comes to Chromebooks. We went 1-to-1 this year for our freshmen, so we were set with them. And then we had enough Chromebooks and laptops in the building that we were able to get that out to all the students. But programs like our business, technology program, we thought we could probably potentially do Microsoft 365 until we discovered that, none of the commands are the same. So now the students can't prepare for testing because they don't have access to the same thing. So there is no equity when it comes to what we can do and what we can't do. And that's one of the biggest issues that we've had in communicating with the state, is that not all programs are the same. Not all CTE programs are the same. Our health assisting program, that curriculum is dictated by DPH. So therefore, we're trying to figure out what September is going to look like to make up what was missed this year, never mind reduce next year's time on learning. So I'm advocating for academics to be working from home, get them what they need, and any CTE programs that I have, like business tech, drafting, if I can get them the laptops to do that, they can potentially work from home, and then we can possibly span out some of those others. But we have a lot of thinking to do when it comes to carpentry and electricity and plumbing. Our space is very tight. We're in the process of potentially building a new school, so we are bursting at the seams. We really don't have a lot of space to be spreading out. So the equity is not there. We did get hotspots for our students. We had some families here in our area. Our Comcast provided 3 months worth of free internet for our families, so they were able to sign up for that. Not quite sure how that's going to look in September, if that's still going to be available to families, or if they're going to be charging that low fee. They said they would charge up $9.95 a month, but for some parents that's not doable. Some families that's still a big fee for them on a monthly basis. So again, we're exploring all possibilities.
Okay, want to give our panelists a little heads up. We had a script, and so I'm going to finish those questions, but I'm also going to try to intersperse one or two that are coming from our participants, and we will be having one of these webinars that focuses specifically on work-based learning in the future. But one of the participants asked, what are you doing with the students who are currently in a work-based learning situation, such as in a clinical or on an apprenticeship type of situation? So are you all still allowing those to occur? Are your businesses allowing students to come in, or have those been suspended? And I'll just throw it out there to any of you who want to answer that question.
Certainly. At our school, the dental office is closed, and so we had to suspend that clinical rotation. The nursing homes were open and really wanted our students, but we closed. The governor made the mandate to close the schools, so that suspended all clinical rotations. We have a very robust cooperative education program, and the governor did not issue any guidance on, nor did the Department of Education issue any guidance on cooperative education. So some schools in Massachusetts did not suspend their cooperative education, others did. At our school, we did. We found that it wasn't safe enough, but parents felt that, well, my kids needs to work, and in some households they were the only one working. Parents are now laid off, they don't have that income stream, so some of our students on their own continue to work. Here in Massachusetts, the age of 18 changes a lot of the working contingencies, so we just told the families and told the students that cooperative education is suspended. If you do this on your own, you need to understand that you are now an employee of that facility and not working under the hospice of the school. But clinical rotations are going to look significantly different moving forward. Now that Massachusetts is in phase 2 and a lot of these facilities are reopening, we have reinstituted our cooperative education program, not the clinical, but the cooperative education program. So if the business that they were working at on cooperative education is open, we're signing them out and they're resuming that employment piece. But clinical rotations have been suspended because school is suspended, and they will look different going forward, especially for our dental offices. They may not allow us back in because they may not want that additional body for social distancing in the operating room.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that we're all kind of running into that same thing. And one of the things that we found with our practical nursing program is we had facilities that were still willing to take our students, but the role that they would have played in the facility would have been much different and really not in line with the curriculum. And so we suspended the clinicals for that purpose. The other thing that we found is that many of our outside certifying agencies, and Maria, I think you mentioned this earlier, we have to follow their guidelines. And many of them kind of have policies on how much can be online, how much has to be face-to-face. And we've seen during the pandemic that they've shifted and allowed some flexibility in that, some of which we found might be beneficial to continue in the future. But we're still working with each of those entities saying, okay, when we allow our cosmetology students to come back to campus, do we go back to only allowing 10% of the curriculum to be online rather than the 40% that they can get currently? And so I think that's another factor that all of us that working in career and technical education are going to be faced with, is what regulatory changes by our accrediting bodies will be made as a result of some of the best practices that we've discovered during the pandemic. So I'm going to move to the next question, and we've talked briefly about it, and that is in terms of budget cuts. And we've talked about potentially needing more equipment that would allow for some distance learning, but yet we're all anticipating that, I think, Maria, you might have said, or Chen, 20% possibly of our budget not being there. And so what are those budget considerations that you're making? And Arlie, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. Well, I tried in talking with all the district teachers just to prep them as early as possible that, of course, things weren't going to look good, no matter what. Even best case scenario, it was going to be difficult. We're looking at, well, it depends on how you count, but probably in the order of 13 to 15% cut. In our district, we have seen some of the high school and middle school CTE positions eliminated already for this coming year. And a lot of that is happening sadly without opportunity for me to be involved in the conversation, which I think is just, we're still, a lot of people still operating in a crisis mode, and totally understandable there. So one of the challenges going forward is to make sure that there's a level of understanding that we don't want to slide backwards on this, even with budget cuts. That if we lose a program out of a high school or out of a middle school, restarting in a year or two could be much more difficult and maybe, as we know, impossible. It can be taken over by something else. So it's really just making sure that all the conversations are happening at the right levels, and that there is some level of awareness, and that, you know, encouraging the teachers to please be loud, be vocal, and bring in your business partners, your advisory committee to say the same things. That looking forward, yes, the businesses are in a tough spot now. They will need people coming back in a year, 2 years, 5 years. We're the people that are going to be preparing those new members of their business community. We can't ignore that now and then hope we just can make it up later down the road. This needs to be foremost in our planning right now, no matter what.
Yeah, and Harley, I think you bring up a good point. We've got a larger number of unemployed, and typically when unemployment goes up in the nation, the need for career and technical education also increases. And so we've got to prepare for that wave to come through as well. Jen, what about your school district and the budget?
Well, Davenport's been through kind of a wild couple of years with budgets. So we've cut millions of dollars over the last several years. Just with, there's a lot, I don't know, you can Google our district. It'll be an entertaining read for you. But, you know, we are kind of at a point where we've cut quite a bit coming into this year. And I mean, maybe it's because I'm just a curriculum specialist. I'm not the director, but I haven't heard any conversations about, additional budget cuts that are coming. We're really looking at how to use those ESSER funds that are available through the CARES Act, in the most efficient and effective ways to make sure that we can maintain all of our programs that we are still, implementing. So at this time, I think I was doing a good job in regards to making sure that we can continue doing the work that we need to do. But using those ESSER funds for all of those additional costs is really how we're trying to leverage all the changes.
Thank you, Jen. Maria?
Same as Jen, as far as the ESSER funds, we're looking to use that money for all of our PPE and to restock what we've used, and any additional supplies that we may need. But we will be relying heavily on our advisors. We're going to be tapping into our advisory boards, especially for like our carpentry, electricity, for supplies. We've provided them with skilled workers for years and years and years. So depending on what these budget cuts come down, we're going to be really tapping in and asking for their help. We've done it once before. They've really come through. We're preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. We hope someone's calculator is off at the state level and somebody makes a mistake and the numbers are not as bad as they say they're going to be. But we've had to make some hard choices, and then there were a couple of things that we've kind of put off, next year. So, you need that new CNC machine, and that's what the freshman curriculum relies heavily on. And it's 20 years old. So, we'll get it next year. We'll have plenty of funds. We were looking really good until COVID hit. So it's making those tough decisions, carry over as much as we possibly can and cut where we can.
Yeah. And you talk about cut, and one of the questions had to do with staffing. And I know, Harley, you mentioned the new transportation regulations, and we've been looking at that as well, because not only do we not have the number of buses to transport students in a limited capacity like that, we already have a hard time finding bus drivers to drive the buses. So I'm not sure that we'd be able to find bus drivers, even if we had. But the other side of that is we had to make a decision in June whether or not to renew or extend the contract for our current bus drivers and all of our support staff. And so we made that decision under the guise or under the thought that we're planning to have school in August and we need our bus drivers. And so we can't afford not to rehire them for the following year. And so staffing decisions are tough at this point in time because we just don't know what that's going to look like. And so I know we ended up reassigning some staff when we were doing all telecommuting. And so can you talk a little bit about if you've had to reassign staff duties for any of your support staff or others to be able to keep them employed? And Arlie, let's start with you.
Yeah, there has been some. It wasn't a permanent reassignment, let's put it that way. We had a lot of need, for example, around food distribution as one example over the spring for families in need, and so we actually were able to reassign some of our classified to be able to help with that, and thus becoming essential employees and all that entails. We haven't really gotten into the details of that, what that might look like for the fall. The state is still weighing the budget. That should be coming out. The final version should be coming out in the next week or so for our next fiscal year. So everybody's waiting until we have those final numbers before we make potentially some permanent reassignments like you're talking about.
Okay, Harley, thank you for that. I think I'm going to move to the next question, which is the last question, but I also want to remind our participants, if you have questions, you can post them in the Q&A section of the webinar, and then we can get those responded to as well. Okay, the next question has to do, I think, with student engagement. And again, we're going to have a series of webinars, and so student engagement is one of those elements. But I know that when we move to all virtual learning for the remainder of this school year, our student engagement went down. And I think traditionally we know that students enjoy career and technical education because they get to work with the fun equipment in the shop, and they get to see the things that they build in the program areas. And it is tactile learning, hands-on learning. And so if we're not able to provide that starting in the fall, or as much of that, even if we're on a schedule that's intermittent with students, how do you feel like that's going to affect student recruitment and the desire for students to enroll in career and technical education programs? And so, Jen, let's start with you.
Sure. We've been actively on a recruitment path this last couple of years. Before CTE just was in the course catalog and kids would sign up in Davenport, there wasn't any active way of helping students identify and even understand the pathways and what they were and how to sign up for them. So we've really kind of turned that on its head in Davenport, and we've been recruiting at the 8th grade level. And so if we were to go distance learning, our plan is to keep the recruitment happening through some creative outlets, utilizing our social media, and engaging with students in that area, using, creative videos to show what do our high schools look like, and just kind of actually start stockpiling kind of a database of, wonderful things about CTE, and just start developing kind of our own homemade, pieces. We do a signing day for our 8th grade students that sign on to join our programs in 9th grade. And we weren't able to do that because that happens in May. So we've talked about doing those digitally. We've seen, I think you probably have all seen examples of, the sports signing day before they go off, and a lot of schools went digital with that. So we're trying to continue to make CTE special. And we're brainstorming ways to do that, to really continue to engage our students and make them feel, proud to be a part of this program, and to understand the incredible value that all of these programs have for these students. So we're still brainstorming, but at this point it's, video and smiles and, all sorts of things.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Maria?
At our school, we're going to have to think a little bit out of the box, because we would do recruiting in several different ways. We would go out to the 8th grade and to the 7th grade, but we also have some schools in our area that would not allow us in because it's competition. So we would always hold a new student night and open up the building, allow, aside from our open house, because we always have an annual open house, but aside from that, this was exclusively for 7th and 8th graders to come in, take a look, ask questions. We had booths set up, tables set up, demonstrations. So if we are not allowed to do that, that's going to be a hit for us. We would also have tour dates where parents could sign up online, come in, tour the building, see the program in action, see the students in action. Again, social distancing, that may not be able to happen. So it may have to be a lot of mailings, like Jen said, videos, posting that, getting that out to individuals. It will be a little bit more difficult. The other thing that we do too is once they're in our school, we always get a lot more applicants than we have seats, but once they're in our school, they need to determine what program they want to spend the next 3.5 years in. So we have an exploratory program. If we have an abbreviated day and they can't do that, it's going to limit the amount of time that these kids are going to be able to spend in a particular program exploring it, which could skew their view of what that trade actually is or isn't. So.
Okay, Maria, thank you. Harley, anything different? Are you doing anything professional development wise to help your faculty engage students via distance? What are you doing?
Yeah, well, it's a lot of similarities, and yeah, when it comes to engaging via distance, we can use some of that, and we found that we can use some of that, like recording, if you will, or photos of I think of my criminal justice teacher creating a crime scene in her backyard. And taking videos, pictures as an assignment, so that her students had to go through the process. Things like that can also serve as marketing materials, and so we can put some of that out. Again, it's tough, of course, when we're not face to face, like Maria talked about, because we have the same kinds of things, tours and then open house, etc. So relying heavily on social media. Videos, and one thing that we were just starting, and we're hoping to start back up, is actually focusing on some videos from former students who are still in our local community at the businesses, and telling their stories about how they got where they are and what they're doing, and successes and challenges that they've run into. Something a little that is able to connect on a more of a local level with those kids. But it is, it does go back to again, the equity question, and how do we make sure that the message is reaching all of the students in our district. We don't want to be unconsciously leaving out a population because they don't have ready access, or because the particular piece of material that we've created isn't getting there. So that's been a high need that we have going forward, and again, just trying to dive in.
Okay. Well, I want to give everyone an opportunity, all of our panelists, to make a closing comment. And I know that we haven't gotten to all of the questions that have been posted in the Q&A, but I do want to remind the participants that this is the first of a series of webinars that deal with high quality CTE programs, specifically in this time of COVID-19. And so if we didn't get to your question this time, hopefully we will in one of our next seminars. Also, there have been some requests for resources. I want to tell you that I have personally found that ACTE's website, ACTE Online, has been rich with resources and answers to questions that I had in regard to some of the very issues that we're talking about today. And so if there are participants that have questions that didn't get them answered today, then feel free to reach out to ACTE staff, because that's what they're there for, is to be a resource for us as we provide high quality CTE programs. So in closing, I'm gonna give you one last chance to make any comments about what your future looks like in terms of planning. And so Jen, thank you for being a panelist today. Where are you headed from here?
I think that this whole situation has been challenging, but it has also opened the door to a lot of unique ways to educate our students that I think a lot of people had the door closed before. So, moving forward, we are continually trying to find ways to be flexible and innovative and really meet the needs of our students in today's world, and really maximize all this amazing technology that is out there for our students, and all of this flexible potential for our students to access curriculum, engage with their learning, and really make every minute meaningful throughout their high school careers.
All right, Jen, thank you. Maria?
For us, my biggest takeaway from all of this is that this has forced everybody to get out of their comfort zone. It's forced everybody to be a little bit uncomfortable and search for new ways. People are getting very creative, innovative, as Jen said, with their teaching, doing things that they never really thought that they would be able to do with their students, having to think outside of the box. So I know we'll come out on top of this, because that's what CTE does. We always find the best in everything that we're doing, and this will all work out for us all. It's been a little bit painful up until now, but we're gonna. And my biggest thing is reach out to the people in your community. Reach out to your resources that you have available to you right within your community, and your colleagues, from across your state. I know that for me, my weekly meetings with the other CTE directors across the state, where you can use them as the sounding board, has been just wonderful. So thank you.
Maria, thank you for sharing your expertise today. Harley, parting words of wisdom for us.
Sure. Very similar thoughts to what Maria was just saying. The CTE community has always been strong. We've always been supportive to everybody. We love to see what the next district over, the next state over is doing, and try to take that and make it our own and make it better. To really kind of living that rising tide lifts all boats kind of approach. I think through these challenging times, we need to make sure that we are all joining together. Again, local, state, national level. Everything ACTE does for us has been very, very well supportive, and highly needed. And this is the time where we need to make sure we have a coherent voice, because it is to the benefit of our entire nation, economy, and all of those individual students.
All right, Harley, thank you. And thank you, all three of you, for your wisdom. And Harley, I think you said it well. I think ACTE is kind of that cohesive force that has brought us together to share resources. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about my membership in ACTE is it gives me a network that I can work with. And so I don't feel so alone when I'm having to make decisions for my school district, but I know that there's a team out there that we're all working to the same. And so at this point, I also want to say thank you to all of our ACTE staff, because I know this has been a challenge for them as well, because of all of the programming that they had scheduled that's had to be reformatted into a virtual. They're just like us. Everything that they had planned has been thrown up in the air, and they're reshuffling the deck, if you will. But I think they're doing a really nice job of keeping resources available to us. And so thank you to Leanne Wilson and Steve and the entire ACTE staff. I want to remind you that, again, this is the first of a series that'll be occurring during June and July. And so we hope you can join the rest of them as we continue to talk about the elements of a high quality career and technical education program. And we hope that as you have questions, that you'll reach out to ACTE and out to each other, because career and technical education is more important now than it's ever been. And it takes all of us working together to make sure that we keep it strong. So again, thank you for joining us. And at this time, we'll bring the webinar to a close. Have a good day.